These are Confessions of an Office Supply Junkie. Well, good day and welcome back. So I started this journal book on June 25th of 2025, and today I've just finished it. Now, I told myself I was going to use more of these same Moleskine Cahiers, but I kind of decided to change notebooks now that I'm coming to the end of it. And what I picked up was a Rhodia Goalbook in dot grid format. So let's talk about how this Cahier worked for me and what I hope to see with the Rhodia. Stay tuned. Well, I've been journaling for years using different kinds of journal books. I started out in maybe the 90s using composition books, mainly just for writing, no sketching. I liked them for that purpose, but they weren't always the best for fountain pen. I was using a variety of pens, mechanical pencil, fountain pen. And then more recently, well, back in early 2024, April of 2024, I started using this Rhodia pad. This is a dot grid. This is their number 16 Rhodia pad. Opens up to the top like that. I like this notebook and I like the quality of paper, and I like because it's a dot grid. It supports both writing and sketching. You know, the rows of dots act like lines, help to align your writing, but it also is good for sketching. So this went through to about October of 2024, and then I went over to this Clairefontaine, similar form factor, but it was a lined notebook rather than dot grid, and I used it from October 2024 to early 2025. And then early this year, I noticed on my bookcase that I had a whole 6-pack of these Moleskine Cahiers. I hadn't really used these before, and I knew that Moleskine had a reputation for some of their paper products weren't really fountain pen friendly, because I have been using fountain pens the last few years almost exclusively for my writing. So the quality of paper is important, right? Otherwise the ink bleeds and feathers and all that. I also knew, somebody had told me that amongst the Moleskine products, if you get the paper products made in either Vietnam or India, it's usually a little bit more fountain pen friendly. So I started early this year in 2025 using one of these Cahier journal books, and what I did, it's the dark blue one. So these Cahiers are a very flexible cardstock cover. There is a little pouch for papers in the back, and it's lined paper. And because it was so flexible, I wanted a little bit firmer surface to write on if I was writing on my lap or whatever. So I made this cardboard little binder, just taped together with gaffer's tape and washi tape. And it has these two little wings here that you can tuck the covers of the Cahier into. And that's what I've been using for this year. And today I finally used it up. So let's talk about how this Cahier book worked for me with fountain pen, and then we'll talk about what's waiting in the wings. Okay, here is the binder itself that I made. It has these little wings taped together with gaffer's tape and decorated front and back with this washi tape, just to make it a little bit nicer looking. And so the notebook covers just slip into it like that. And my intention was, at the outset, I would just keep using all the rest of the Cahiers until I used them up. But of course, once I wandered over to my local paper stationery store, Penny Smith's Papers, I had the idea that, well, maybe I needed to get me something a little newer, a little different. So this is the first page of this Cahier, and I started it on 20 June 2025, and I started using this Scrivener fountain pen. This is a wonderful fountain pen, but it is a medium nib, a little bit wider than what I was used to, and it came with this really nice converter. And what I like about the converter on this pen is it threads in. It doesn't just push onto the feed. It has some threads here, so it keeps it a little bit more secure, which I like, and it has a good quantity of ink. So definitely like the converter system on this Scrivener. But it's a medium nib, as I said, a German nib, which makes it a little bit wider than some. And I wasn't really used to having that wide of a line with this kind of paper. So it took some getting used to writing with this pen, this thick line weight with the narrow rulings on this paper, but it was okay. I got used to it. In fact, down here at the bottom, I started changing my style of printing, and it started working a little bit better for me. I liked it. Now, you might notice that even though the line weights are rather wide, there's no bleeding. It's not spreading out and bleeding on the front side of the paper, which is fine. So that means that the Vietnamese-made paper products from Moleskine are okay as far as the front side of the paper, but they do show ink marks through the backside. And so I would not recommend using these cahiers on both sides of the paper. Consider it to be a single-sided journal book only. So this was the start of my journaling with this new book. And it worked really well with this Scrivener fountain pen. I've used a number of other fountain pens in it as well, and I continued using it throughout most of this year. So my initial ideas about the typing scale, which you might have seen a video about, was sketched in this book using the Scrivener fountain pen, and more sketches on how to make these and how I was going to put them together and everything. So I'm kind of starting to use this book by July. I'm using it as a combination of writing journal and sketch journal. Here I've switched to a new fountain pen, this Monteverde Dakota, and I was using a different ink in it that was a little bit light. I've since changed the ink on it. I believe right here is when I changed the ink on the Monteverde. So somewhere around September, I start to get ideas for a perpetual calendar that uses steel balls or marbles in little pockets. And I started sketching ideas for this. So now this journal book is becoming a hybrid between a writing journal and a sketchbook, and it is a lined journal. It's not, dot grid or plain paper. And I'm using fountain pen for this, so it's not maybe the ideal instrument for that, but it worked fine, and I continued to sketch these ideas as they evolved more and more, and until we got this particular device, which is continuing to evolve, by the way. I'm going to be making a new version of that soon, and I might be sharing that on this channel, so stay tuned for that. But also, I renewed my interest in the abacus. The recent abacus videos that I've done on this channel were the result of some reading and studying and thinking and sketching. Here's an example. And then I'm starting to make these tables of abacus operations as I'm beginning to study the abacus more in preparation for some videos. Then I did some sketching in preparation for designing a new 3D printed abacus bead that comes in two halves, two conical halves that will solvent weld together. More sketching with both pencil and fountain pen and other marker pens more recently. And again, for some of the recent abacus videos, I'm doing some flow charting. I believe this purplish ink is the Monteverde MP1 fountain pen. I'm using some Monteverde fountain pen ink, and this is a piston filler. It's a really nice pen as well. These three pens, these two Monteverdes and the Scrivener, have been the main pens I've been using this year. So anyway, doing some flow charting on abacus operations in preparation for one of the recent videos, and of course doing this abacus operation table, which you might have seen if you watch one of those videos. And of course, more recently, some newer design changes to the abacus perpetual calendar that you'll be seeing one of these days. And then more recently, toward the end of this book, is just notes about some of the videos I've done recently, etc., etc., and it comes down to the very last page, and we're done. And that means this is going to be the new book that we're going to have to open up. So not only have I been using fountain pen in these books, I've been using wood case pencils. Recently, like for these kind of illustrations, I've been using a little pouch full of these colored pencils. These are Artist Loft brand colored pencils. They are really handy for sketching like this. And even, yes, the Pentel brush pen If you don't know about these have a flexible synthetic fabric brush, just like an ink brush pen for like sumi painting or writing. And they have these cartridges that are similar to fountain pen ink cartridges. And these are great pens for doing varied line weight illustrations. If you use a really fine, barely pressing on it, you can get super fine lines. And then if you press on it really thick, you get really fat ink lines. These are great little tools for illustration. So colored pencils and brush pen. So you got to have a pretty good quality paper for that. And that's why I'm hoping that this paper, this Rhodia pad, will satisfy that requirement. Okay, the Rhodia Goalbook in dot grid, A5 size, and an Olfa touch knife. You know, I first found out about these Olfa touch knives back sometime in the 1980s, maybe? But that was before Amazon existed, and so you had to find a store locally to sell them to you. And I had one of these for a long time, and now I can buy a whole bag of these off Amazon. They're great little knives for using around your office. All right, so it has an elastic closure band. There's a paper band we'll take off. There we are. Save that. Save that. It has a little draw cord loop, like an elastic loop for a pin in the back, which is nice. Elastic covering it up and closing it. Orange liners. It has 2 markers, bookmarks, and of course I have to smell this. How do you like the smell of that? Is that pretty good? This is called a Goalbook. So it has the entrance here, the start here. So there's a table of contents section. So you can fill out the table of contents as you put content into the book. And then there is I guess it's like a perpetual calendar. It starts in January. Basically, you have 2 full spreads for all the days of the year. And that's pretty cool. And then you have this spread, which is 1/3 of a page for each month. And then the rest of the book is dot grid, and the pages are numbered right here, 1 through 224. So it has a little bit of a perpetual calendar, kind of a calendaring use. Table of contents is going to be really handy. So the Monteverde MP1, I currently have a kind of a purplish colored ink, and it's a little bit thinner of an ink, so this is going to be a good test to see how it works. Now, Rhodia has a good reputation for being fountain pen friendly paper. Okay, that looks really nice. Nice quality of writing, and I can barely see the letters through the paper, and I think it's going to work for me, at least in the table of contents. It's going to work fine to write on both sides of the paper. I haven't really decided if I'm going to be using both sides of the paper when I'm using the main pages of it. I guess it depends on what I'm doing. If I'm doing colored pencil and regular pencil and stuff, maybe that'll be fine, but some of the fountain pen ink could be bleeding through. We'll have to just figure that out as we go. But, well, there is the start of a new journal book, and I've never used one of these Goalbooks before. I like the color. I like the blue and orange. It has the little elastic band to keep it tight, closed, and then it's probably not really ideally suited to a really fat fountain pen like that, but this little Dakota is much more well suited for it like that. So that's probably more like the pen I'm going to take and use all the time in this Rhodia pad. So, well, I'm looking forward to it. I really do like dot grids, and because the pages are numbered, that means I can refer to them in the table of contents. So that'll be fun. So I should also mention that in the very back cover, inside the back cover, there is a documents pouch here that is like accordion style that opens up, and I'm going to take the actual paper slip or sleeve that had all the features on it listed. I'm going to just stick it in there, and then I can have that for reference later on. Well, I'm looking forward to getting into this new journal book and using it. I'm really excited, and so far, I like the quality of the binding, just the way this Rhodia is put together. These are a little pricey when you buy them from your local stationery store like I did, but they are available online, of course. Rhodia has a really good reputation, as does Clairefontaine and a number of other papers like that. Lectern, one of the others, for being fountain pen friendly. So I'll be using this book with an assortment of pens. Currently, as I said, my Scrivener I just cleaned out. Been using that extensively. And then, so I have the two Monteverdis, the little small Dakota and the bigger piston filler MP1. I'll be using both of these with this journal book. Looking forward to it. Exciting times here with a new journal book. And if you're a journaler, if you like writing with nice pens and nice paper and little bound books, let me know down below. What do you like? What is your favorite journal book and paper, and what's your favorite pen? Or do you have a whole bunch of pens that you like? I'd like to hear from you because, fountain pens and nice papers and journaling is a really cool thing to be doing. Just putting your words down to paper is important. It helps us regain our sanity and helps us to kind of figure out where we're coming from, what's happening inside of us in our lives sometimes by putting it down on paper. But also the accoutrements of writing, the nice papers and notebooks and pens and whatnot is also a lot of fun as part of that. So talk to me down below. What do you like as far as pens and paper and journal books and even pencils? Let's talk about it. And until next time, get your journal out, get your favorite pen or pencil, and start writing. Start journaling, sketching, whatever you do. And of course, as always, stay creative and have yourselves a great day. Bye-bye for now.